color, sky upon the sea, green, the taste of dill, memories of a dream, the burst of flaming roses, red, passionate and free, cream, a neutral place, we're finding common ground, the warmth of mauve, comfort and calm, gold, a place where dreams are glowing, colors of the heart.
Welcome, everybody, to Abstract Art Behind the Scenes. Tonight, the theme is raw power of emotion in abstract painting. This particular way of painting could have been happening for many, many generations before we actually understood it to be a movement. But there was a particular time in 1949 when Life magazine decided to make an article of Jackson Pollock and really talk about his life and the way he got into action painting. And why did they choose Jackson Pollock to be the all-American painter, the best painter in America? Exactly, they actually said he was the best. Well, I think they really wanted the American people to see that it was possible for a cowboy like Jackson to be a very sensitive man as well. Somebody who's rugged and powerful and also very sensitive and creative. And America really wanted to feel more creative. It was a time, the late 40s, early 50s. We had come past World War II. Basically, there was Hiroshima, Nagasaki, and the bombs, and people were afraid, but they wanted to settle down. And America was starting to prosper again after those difficult times. Somebody said that Pollock was so fiery in his behavior that he really didn't have much stability, whereas others said that he had such fire that it actually made him even more creative. Pollock himself said, "Painting is self-discovery. All good artists paint what they are." And he also said, "It seems to me that the modern painter cannot express his age. The airplane, the atomic bomb, the radio, in the old forms of the Renaissance or any other past culture. Each age finds its own techniques." Pollock ended up living in New York for many, many years. And while he was there, he joined a community of artists. Now, he was the youngest of this group, and the art critics decided to give this group a name. The very first generation was called Abstract Expressionists, but there was a second generation as well that bloomed out of that first one. Tonight, I'm going to be talking about the first generation of Abstract Expressionists. And basically, why they came to be all under the umbrella of one name is because they all were into Jungian and Freudian psychology, into symbology and dreams and mythology, and they wanted to bring these ideas into their paintings through their unconscious. And this is why, to me, this idea of expression, right, abstract expressionism, is all about raw feelings, feelings in the moment, just letting it out. Now, of course, all of these artists had training in schools. They weren't only using what was inside. They really had some training that they could fall back on. But ultimately, they wanted to be able to express themselves in a way that probably hadn't been done so much in the rest of the world. And that's why it was a special new movement. So how about that we look at a picture of Jackson Pollock. Just see what this guy was up to. Here he is with his hands folded. He looks pretty confident here. And the painting is full of life. He basically had a big paint can, and he had brushes and sticks and different implements, and he flung them across a canvas that was on the floor. And here he is. He always has that cigarette in his mouth in many photos. Anyway, he was a very intense guy, and he basically started this whole new idea that you could work very large like this instead of using an easel. When he was growing up, and he was born in 1912, his father was a surveyor of Native American land. So he would join him sometimes, and he would notice that there were sand paintings of these wonderful pictographs or pictograms. And he really enjoyed talking with the Native Americans, getting to know their culture. And we can see that some of these kinds of pictograms developed in his own art eventually. When he was young, having 4 brothers and being the youngest, he followed their footsteps in certain ways, and a lot of them decided to be artists, or at least a couple of them. They ended up going to New York before he did, and they invited him to come to the Student Artists League in New York to paint and learn from Thomas Hart Benton. And this is a painting of his. He was considered a regionalist painter, meaning that he depicted people from the region of wherever he was living in America. And he had a lot of empathy for all kinds of people, even though usually blacks and whites weren't doing things together so much. He wanted to bring people together. So in some ways his work was a social commentary, because we're talking about the 1940s, 1930s. This is a time when there was definitely segregation. And Jackson really appreciated the way that this man taught. He taught about Cubism, about Surrealism, and you can see that his painting here has a lot of flow, a lot of energy in it. And Jackson really enjoyed putting a lot of energy into his art as well. This was in about 1930, early 1930s when Jackson went to the Artists League in New York. He also loved quite a few different artists. And this particular painting is called Moonlit Cove. 1890, it was painted by Albert Pinkham Ryder. You can see it's old. It's got a lot of cracks in it. So, but very moving, luminous work. He also loved the work of Picasso. He was very influenced by Cubism, as well as the surrealistic elements in Picasso's work, meaning that you can understand what you're seeing, but it wouldn't naturally look like that in real life. Surreal takes things and makes it beyond realism. And it's also dreamlike. And he really liked the ideas coming from dreams. He also loved the work, that was called Guernica, by the way, and it was about the Spanish town Guernica being bombed by the Nazis during World War II. This has a little lighter note to it, Juan Miró, and it's called Femme et Oiseau dans la nuit. That means Woman and Bird in the Night, 1947. There are definitely a lot of symbols in this painting, a little bit like the pictograms we were looking at earlier, and dreamlike visions and a lot of intuitive feeling in this work, and even playful quality. When Jackson was at school, he didn't really play around with large canvases. But in 1935, Franklin D. Roosevelt offered the WPA program, Works Progress Administration, where they employed millions of people to build structures across America. He also included a federal arts project that enabled many artists, including Pollock and many of the people that he knew, as well as his wife, Lee Krasner, who was an incredible artist, to paint along with the Mexican muralists. So basically, the Mexican muralists, Orozco, Rivera, Siqueiros, they all helped. I don't know if all of them were involved in this, but at least some of them were helping Americans build these murals. And of course, they were on a very large scale. This is by Jose Clemente Orozco. It's called Zapatistas, 1931. It's about the workers who were rebelling because they weren't given enough pay for their work. This one here, I don't have a date on, but it's by Diego Rivera, The History of Mexico. And this is by David Siqueiros, a mural in Chapultepec Castle in Mexico City. Pollock was very lucky to be able to take a workshop with Siqueiros, and he learned how to splatter paint, to work really large, and this was just the beginning of a new kind of expression of art. And this is one of the paintings that he made in 1943, 1944. He was commissioned by Peggy Guggenheim. Peggy Guggenheim had her own gallery in New York. She had fled from Europe during the war, and when she settled in America, she helped many artists to get their work out into her gallery and in general become more known. She decided to help Pollock with his career, and the beginning of that was to commission him for something that she would put in her home. Well, apparently her home was large because this painting was about 20 feet wide. And I believe that Jackson Pollock made this in 1 to 2 days, feverishly. Here is another painting of his that was made just about the same time period. It's called Moon Woman Cuts the Circle. I'll just take a couple comments about this if anybody wants to say what they're seeing. You can unmute yourself with the space bar if you need to.
Definitely see a Picasso influence.
You see a what?
Picasso influence?
Yes, completely. In what way do you feel that, though?
I just feel it with the just the shapes and the swipes and the curvilinear. You know, it could be, if you said that was a Picasso to me, I could easily believe you.
I'm having a hard time hearing you. Can you try that last sentence one more time?
Oh, I was just saying, if you had said to me that that's a Picasso, I wouldn't have doubted it.
Right. Ah, interesting. So it could have easily been a Picasso. Fascinating. Any other thoughts? Thank you so much.
I'm seeing what I think would be a profile, but it's not an ordinary profile as the one on the right.
All right, here?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
So it's more like a Picasso rendition of a profile.
Right.
The eye cut out, so the face cut out. And then on the other side, the bird, it looks like a bird creature almost to me.
Mm-hmm.
Is also
It could be. The one with the eye up here? Or this whole bird feeling. Oh my.
Oh goodness.
I love that. Yeah, I mean, the moon is somewhere in this, right? But we don't know exactly where.
Julie,
Yeah?
in the upper right-hand corner, my eyes make me see an Indian headdress,
Yes.
right? So
Right.
we see the influence of his father's involvement and his interest in the Native Americans.
Completely.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I also see tremendous amount of movement and the primary colors, yellow, red, blue.
Exactly. Yeah, very wonderful color. A lot of exuberance in this. Thank you,
Yeah.
everybody. I'm going to move to the next slide. I appreciate your comments. This one here is called Silver Over Black, White, Yellow, and Red, and it was made in 1948. There's the feeling of figures in this. Again, this feeling of so much motion that Jackson was a very restless kind of guy. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about his mood and his life and how he came to need to move a lot when he painted. So basically, Jackson was from a family of 4 other boys, and his father and he had some good times together, traveling, but they moved a lot. And also the family was not really into talking about their feelings. So it seems to me that some of his brothers and he needed to express their feelings through their art. And maybe in some ways that was the only way they could do it. And Jackson said, I believe easel painting to be a dying form, and the tendency of modern feeling is toward the wall picture or mural. And all the other people that he knew, who he was close to during that time, the ones that were part of that first generation of abstract expressionists, they were very much into the Jungian and Freudian psychology. So they shared a lot of this information with each other. They got together at cafes. And I mean, this was like a real artist community. They critiqued each other's work. They talked about poets and musicians. I mean, it was a real mecca to be in New York at that time. All of these painters started using ideas like these pictograms, and they would scrape into the canvas. They would pour the paint. They tried different things. They were very experimental. What I would like is to share my requests of you during our interactive talk today. I first of all want to say that last time, so many of you responded, and I really appreciated that, and I thought that your comments were very insightful. I learned a lot from you, and I was very stimulated by our discussion. So I really look forward to more today. Respect. Please keep your responses short, and let's provide space for a variety of responders. I would really like to hear your feelings and thoughts rather than any material that you might read from the internet. However, if you want to, feel free to put any of that information in the chat. I hope this is a renewing experience for you. and you feel energized by it. And last, let's learn from each other by listening attentively, knowing that we can never have all the answers. Please wait for my prompts when I ask for your comments on some of the paintings. So with no further ado, let's go to a screen here that shows who were the first, what was the first generation that included abstract expressionists in New York. So you can see on this list, Adolf Gottlieb, Clifford Still, Willem de Kooning, Barnett Newman, Lee Krasner, the only woman, Franz Klein, and Jackson Pollock, that Jackson was the youngest of this group. And I am sure that he was greatly influenced by their work. And when Life magazine said that Jackson Pollock was the greatest painter, I think it doesn't mean that he wasn't a great painter just because I believe that all these others were equally as good. It's just the fact that he was young, he was vibrant, he had an exciting action painting that was a little bit different than some of these others. And they wanted to highlight him because he was he was an exciting guy, but he was also somewhat of an alcoholic. He was a manic depressive person. He was not easy. He had a bigger than life personality. So this is one of his works that he painted in 1955. How does this look to all of you? This is like, after he painted those ones for Peggy Guggenheim, and after he'd been working with a lot of the pictograms and such. What's the shift that's going on here, and what do you see in this? I'm open.
Well, it's not quite as frantic as the other ones.
More frantic?
No, less frantic.
Less frantic.
Yeah. Also, it could be a Miro influence.
Yes. Interesting. And is that because all the shapes, they're clear shapes, aren't they?
Yeah,
Even though there's a lot of yellow in the back, but they're clear, pretty clearly defined black and red shapes.
Yeah.
It's fairly simplistic.
How big
In
is
what
it?
way?
Oh, sorry.
In what way? There's a reoccurring pattern of the black and red that is creating the imagery,
Mm-hmm.
and it's repeated. So in a way, it's very simple. It's not complicated like some of his earlier pieces.
So he's using repeated forms, repeated shapes. I would say less forms than shapes. A form would be more three-dimensional. So shapes, repeated shapes. And also he has a ground in the background, like it's a full ground of almost like one feeling. And on that, he shows the rich, dark tones that just jump out, right?
How big is this? You know?
What date is it?
No, how big?
Oh, how big? I do not have the size on this, but I imagine this is not one of his really large works.
Because it almost looks like a mono painting. It almost looks like a monoprint.
Ah, interesting.
With the texture.
I do not have all the information on that, but if it is a monoprint, it looks like there was a lot of paint used. Like it's very thickly put on.
Yeah.
Julie, can you tell us how this was done? If he splattered and also painted more deliberately, as opposed to some of the other ones that look like they were maybe, I mean, it's all deliberate in a way, but it's how it's applied.
I think that Anne, you were the one talking before, right? Anne? Oh, she was
Yeah.
talking about a monoprint.
Yes.
Yeah, and actually, you know what it looks like to me? It looks like he put a lot of color down on a glass plate or on somewhere, and then laid paper over it, and pushed something heavy on it to make a print of it, in a sense. Because when you push the paper down heavily, then the paint moves around and creates these interesting textures. Doesn't it look like that?
Yeah. That's
Yeah.
what a monoprint is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Does.
So I'm going to move to the next one here.
I just wanted to say something about that last one, Julie.
Okay, sure.
That comes closest to a Rorschach type image of anything I think I've ever seen. It almost begs you to completely bypass your conscious interpretation of it and just stare into something deep.
Beautiful. Yeah. And also something you could just meditate on and move into a dreamlike state of whatever, right? Just move into your own story with it as you meditate on it.
I was just going to say that this one reminds me of water, with the flow of water, and the yellow is kind of shimmering. To me, it looks like some kind of watery surface with the red and black are objects floating on the water. So that's my interpretation,
That's a great perspective you're giving.
or an interpretation.
I wonder what its name is. I wonder what the name of this picture is.
Oh, this picture is called Moon Vibrations.
And
Didn't I guess I didn't tell you the name.
You did.
1955.
Julie,
Is that moon or moon?
Moon as in the moonbeam
Julie,
Okay.
sky.
and
Julie,
Judy,
what
can
is
I
the
make
name
a short comment?
We can only have one person at a time. Somebody's been trying to talk for a little bit. I'm going to let her go first, okay?
what is the
Move.
medium? Is it oil paint? Is it like
He mostly worked in oil, but I imagine that sometimes he used acrylic and enamel.
So
I do not have every bit of information on this, but if you want to, you can look up the title of it.
It's oil on canvas. It says oil on canvas mounted on masonite.
Oil on canvas. Yep. So was there one more person who wanted to say something?
Yeah, I just want a very short comment. If to look at it just from the point of view of emotions, the one that he did for Guggenheim was quiet, because the whole area was kind of equal, repeated, and it's relaxing. This one is much more, has strong dimension, strong color, pure colors. So it's not as quiet as that first one.
I agree. Actually, the one that we saw before that you were thinking of, that's definitely not quiet.
No, the one
That's not
he did
quiet.
For Guggenheim.
That you think is quiet, more
Yes.
quiet.
This one.
Yes,
one is-
because it's an overall pattern more, right? Like it feels like a pattern that's blending into each other all over, versus having some things stand out in relief.
Yeah.
So let's go back to this one again. Much stronger
Yes.
relief.
Right.
Thank you, everybody, for your comments on this. I'm going to move to the next one. All right, this one here is by Mark Rothko. It's oil and coal, actually. It's called Rites of Lilith, and it was painted in 1945. And Lilith was actually a demonic woman or demonic figure in Jewish mysticism. I had never heard of Lilith before. Can you find Lilith in this?
Yeah, I see a female figure, center right, going from the bottom to the top.
In this here?
Yeah, there.
Me too. Mm-hmm.
Right. Right.
I also see hints a little bit to the left of a shape of breasts and lower down, there's, you
Mm,
know, like an hourglass shape. So there's various hints of female forms.
I agree. Beautiful.
And there's, it look like where Sarah pointed out a little bit toward the center, it looks like legs and maybe even pubic hair,
face.
possibly.
Mhm.
Yes, sort of looks like a skirt also, and it looks to me like she's standing in front of a hearth, so maybe kind of like a witchy influence in a way.
You know you know what I love about this piece is the fact that he made his pigment so thin. It's almost like a watercolor. And it looks like he used some very thin brush to do calligraphy or in size with some kind of an instrument to lift out to get to the white of the canvas. I mean, there's a lot of beautiful light on dark and dark on light lines. And there's a lot of the feeling of almost a grid on this. Do you see the grid in the back, like the feeling of
Yeah.
rectangles and squares?
Hmm.
Anything else from this one that comes to you?
I think Lilith is also in the lesbian community has some significance
Oh.
as a positive being, but that's all I know about
Oh,
it.
that's a good thing to know
Yeah.
because I'm sure that there's always multiple meanings, and she doesn't look demonic in this. So maybe I got the wrong meaning for this painting.
I see some kind of a liqueur or a bottle, and I'm thinking Lilith could also be a reference to some kind of a vermouth or a special liqueur.
Wow. Where's that bottle?
I know that
I have
Lilith is important in the Jewish feminist world. There's a magazine called Lilith, or there was, and she was sort of the alternative Eve. She was created before Eve, but she was too independent. So
Ah.
they had to get rid of her. She
Oh,
was
I
missing
see.
Adam. That was one of the stories about Lilith. But there, I have to say, I like the color scheme on this more than any of the other ones you've shown us. I think it's very
Mm.
pleasing and harmonious. And
It's quite harmonious. I mean, the same colors, really warm tones, very, very livable piece, right? Really nice piece. All right, I'm going to move on unless there's one more comment. Okay. Now this one here is by Adolf Gottlieb. And this is called Man Looking at Woman, 1949. He basically wrote this. The artist strove to use his work to fill the spiritual vacuum that swallowed the souls of modern people. I'll do that one more time. The artist strove to use his work, notice he says his, because all the men were artists back then, at least who were known, to fill the spiritual vacuum that swallowed the souls of modern people. That spiritual vacuum, does anybody want to talk about what they think that spiritual vacuum was and how he might have been working with that in this piece? Or you don't have to know how this piece was sharing it, but any thoughts about that?
I'm guessing that the spiritual vacuum might have to do with things being mechanized and uniform and, you know, regimented and, you know, people losing touch with humanity and individuality and, you know, personal relationships in the big, you know, cosmopolitan city and in the big factories and then, you know, the shift to, you know, a much more standardized kind of existence. So the art was, I guess, trying to be a cry against that, you know.
And basically acknowledge emotions and our dreams and our feelings about life in a way that was more unconscious, you know, not the, you know, the kind of figurative work that we've seen centuries before, you know, but more going into places that help people to move through their feelings. That was very nicely said. Any other thoughts about that spiritual vacuum?
Well, the color scheme is suggestive of a vacuum, that gray, cloudy thing, and also it has a sort of a grid pattern. And then the images are like, hieroglyphic or petroglyph or whatever. So they seem to be symbolic and maybe harking back to, our ancient times or our ancient roots that we might have feel like we lost, and so he's trying to reconnect with those.
Beautiful, beautifully said.
Yeah, it's really like the antithesis of Madison Avenue or the Saturday Evening Post view of what it is to be human. And the woman image certainly is reminiscent of like the goddess of Harappa or Mohenjo-Daro. There's figurines from that time. This image is outside of a modern conception of humanity.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I love the idea that these forms on the woman, as you're talking about this being reminiscent of a certain time period. Is that what you're saying? But
well, yeah, she's really like a goddess image. She's outside of everyday image. She represents something much more powerful.
Yeah, because it's all coalesced into very condensed forms that make you feel woman without having to see the whole body, but the round shapes. And what about the man?
Julie, could I just make an observation? I can't help feeling that even though it's titled as man looking at a woman, I'm looking at the man a lot more than the woman. She's smaller by half. The man has got all these rounded.
No.
The shapes are more voluptuous, if you will, than the woman.
Now, is the man, are you thinking, you see my arrow, right? The man is where?
Is on the right.
No.
You think this is the man?
Yeah.
Oh, I don't.
No.
I was thinking that was the woman.
Yeah.
Woman.
That's interesting.
And this one's the man.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
But you were thinking the opposite?
No. I was also initially.
No, the woman who was speaking, I'm asking.
Oh, I'm sorry.
What, did you want to answer? Okay.
You're muted. You're muted, Margaret.
If you're trying to talk, I can't hear you.
My husband is making some noise in the background, John.
Oh, okay. No problem.
I was trying to be respectful of that. Yes, the man to me is the figure on the right.
Interesting.
The woman with a sort of tiny waist, but no breasts.
I see.
Is the one on the left.
Well, you know what? It could be. Because he's not alive to tell us.
And he's there's a nose and a.
Well, the thing is, though, the figure on the left is looking at the figure on the right, so it would seem like it should be that the man is looking at the woman.
Well, at least the nose of the man is looking, the eye is looking straight at us. But of course, that's the Egyptian way, right?
Yes.
You put the eye looking this way.
Yes.
It could be that way, or it could be a Picasso-esque head.
That's true.
So you have it both ways.
I want to say one thing about the way this picture moves and the way we move around it and how beautifully this is done. Do you notice that orange right in the middle?
Yeah.
I mean, it's just so playful and flavorful for me to see that orange, but it doesn't distract me because I enjoy the way the black moves all the way around. And the white is here, but also on the left, right? And the orange gets me anchored in the center. But I end up really moving all around, mostly because of all the black hieroglyphs. And then the center of interest is where the white is and where the orange is. But I still am moved to continue to go around the painting because there's black within the figures. I just think this is very adroitly done. I mean, a beautiful job of working with spatial relationships. And with that, I'll ask for one more comment on this, and then we'll move to the next one.
I have a comment.
Mhm.
Julie, number one, thank you so much for talking about what you just did about helping my eye to move like that. But I wanted to pick up on what the gentleman said. I think it was Michael about, well, it reminded me, I can't remember exactly what he said, but it drew my thoughts to the idea that this is primitive, like primitive statements into a modern context, especially the woman who I certainly see as the one on the right. Reminds me now, I wouldn't have thought it when I first saw this, but when after that initial statement was made, now I see it as a Venus figure. Do you know, you must know those old clays where they're large bellies, large breasts.
Yes.
And they were made, when were they made? They come from ancient Neolithic times, I think around 3,000 years old, or maybe, but they could be older than that. And so, yeah, so it's certainly not modern in that. So, yeah, so it's a really interesting blend of modern and primitive.
It really is.
Yeah.
Pretty amazing combination.
Yeah.
Like fusing all of the centuries together.
Julie, I'm sorry, say the name of the artist again, please.
Yes, this is Adolf Gottlieb, and this is called Man Looking at Woman, 1949.
Could I make just one more comment, which
just one more, and then I'd like to move on after that. Yeah.
I just want to ask how other people feel about the arrow on the bottom right, which directs me every time I go back to that and around. But this is very counter-Western protocol. Western is from left to right. Asian or Chinese is from right to left. But Asian would be from top down instead of going from the bottom up. So it seems to be upending a lot of things. Just
you know that any painting, we can arrive into a painting from the right or the left, and typically it's from the bottom. Most paintings I notice, at least in America, you know, but there are a lot of paintings where we come in from the bottom as though we're stepping into the work. And in this case, I can follow it from that arrow up toward the left and go counterclockwise. It's like the action of the painting, or I can go in the lower left and move it the other way, but then I come against the arrow. So in reality, I think what you're saying, yeah, it is a little counterintuitive because we're going counterclockwise, but that arrow is very strong in terms of implying direction.
Julie? That eye up on the right-hand side is mesmerizing. It's
this
interesting that, huh?
This one here?
Yeah, because you would think the eye would be inside the man or inside the woman's face, and it's not. It's outside, and it serves a purpose as much as the black line underneath the orange. But
beautiful. And you know, I know why it's so important and why you're mentioning it. It's because whenever we see things that are of human or being, you know, like an eye of a creature or any kind of being at all, we're attracted to it. I mean, it's also a detail, right? But the eye is bringing us in. So thank you for that, for bringing up that. I'm going to move on just so that we can have a little variety here before 7:30. This is Clifford Still. I had a hard time finding a title for this, but I do know that it was made in 1943, and I believe it's called 1943-A, but I don't have a great title. This is one of his earlier works, and he, to me, is almost a real minimalist in this. I'll just take one or two comments and then I'd like to move to the next one. But I just wanted, at least if anybody has a little something to say, because it's a very interesting piece that I find very satisfying. But you may not.
I love it, Julie.
Yeah,
Great, great.
Yeah.
I love it.
it's beautiful.
It's just so easy to watch, but it's so unusual.
It is.
I think me too. This is one of my favorite as far as the composition. It's very
I could live with this
and the colors
in my home. In my home.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
It also reminds me of like the surface of water, the color, the blue with a little gray or white, and then it looks almost like, you know, objects rippling on the surface a little. So to me, it has a watery color, and very pleasing composition. Like it very much.
Yeah.
It makes me think of Chinese brush painting.
Yes.
What's it called again, Julie?
It doesn't really have a title of,
Oh.
of any means. It's 1943-A.
Oh, okay. By Clifford Still.
Clifford Still.
And is it oil on canvas?
I believe it's oil, and I did not get a chance to look up every single works, what everything is made by, but I would look up Clifford Still and see, I have a feeling that most of his works are oil or acrylic.
But the blue looks like watercolor.
I would imagine that he thinned down whatever he was using with possibly
maybe.
turpentine.
Yeah.
It's oil on cloth.
Oil on cloth. Thank you for looking that up, Ann. Okay, I'm going to move to the next one here. We're going to wake up with this one.
Oh, wow.
This is Willem de Kooning.
Mm.
It's untitled. It was made in the 1940s. And looks like he's got a few. I did not get to look up all that he used in this, but it looks like he could have combined media, like possibly pastel and oil, or he just used the oil in a way that, where he scraped it and he got different textures with it.
Julie?
Yes.
Julie, just so you know, William de Kooning worked for my dad.
Really? Amazing, Sandy.
I think mainly what they were doing, they were doing were they were hitting all the bars in Midtown Manhattan.
Yeah, they were into bars, this group,
Well,
for sure.
De Kooning was trained in doing displays and designs for products, and that was what my dad's business was. So
wow, I did read a little bit about that. That's fascinating. Amazing, Sandy.
Wow.
What a small world. So what does this feel like compared to some of the others that we've been looking at?
It's wonderful. I'm sorry. I love it. I just absolutely love it. Yeah.
And is there anybody who doesn't? I mean, this is, it's so great to hear all the opinions, right? Like, why would you like it? Why would you not?
I'm wondering if he used a palette knife in some of these places, in some of these spots.
It looks like it, doesn't it?
A palette knife.
Yeah, it looks like it, like in this area.
Yeah, where, yeah.
On the right?
Where the colors, yeah.
Right. Just scraping into thick paint.
That area on the lower right looks to me like a painting within a painting.
Right.
Like almost an animal?
Well, no, I mean, it almost looks to me like it's intended to be the representation of a painting itself within this whole context.
Because of the complication all in this area.
Yeah.
More de Kooning.
Do you feel that this is balanced in with the rest, Joe?
Wow.
You know what I think? I think I remembered hearing that de Kooning worked on making things not so balanced.
That looks like the focal point, Julie.
Yeah, it does, doesn't it?
Yeah, and it's not in the right place.
Well, no, it could be there, but I want to share something with you. You see how this painting, all the whites are on the outside? There's a little on the inside, but do you see how we move around with the whites being on the outside?
Yep.
The whites are inside too, but they're not that strong. So this is what helps me. And are we moving counterclockwise or clockwise here?
I don't know. Counterclockwise for me.
Probably counter.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's what it feels like to me.
Ooh, what's that? Ooh.
You know, I'll just say that when I first saw it, I thought it might be a cityscape. It looked like roofs of houses I saw.
Me too.
Sort of in the middle on the lower part. But later I saw shapes of pianos, animals. But I think that colors to me are more happy, you know, and it's, I like this better than a bunch of the other ones I saw.
Great. Okay.
So those are my thoughts.
He painted this over, he laid down one color and then painted the other things over it. Yeah.
Well, it is a color field what they call this. The idea is of a color field. And when Jackson Pollock painted his large ones that were drip paintings, they were considered a field of color. And I think that the artists took their lead from him and others that worked with large fields of color, meaning this is red, whereas some of the others were brown or gray overall with variation. I'm going to move to the next one unless there's one
I wanted
last
to say something
comment.
real quick.
Yeah.
So to me, it looks like the topic of this painting is light itself. I mean, there are almost see little, not candlelight, but you know, the little bulbs that are that you put in night lights, or just there's so many lights going on in the entire picture. And then the fact that it's this orange, yellow with white, it just seems like it uses light to be about light.
Very interesting. There's a lustrous quality, isn't there?
Yeah.
Oh,
Yes,
definitely.
yes, yes.
Yeah. There's luster and luminosity. Like I'll show what I mean. This part right here is more lustrous.
Yeah.
Because when you have something around white and then dark around it, it becomes lustrous. And then the luminous passages are like this yellow here. It's very luminous with darker tones around it, the bright yellow. Yeah, very nice. Thank you, everyone.
That's lustrous. Right.
This one here is by Arshil Gorky. It's called Water of the Flowery Mill, 1948. And this reminds me of another artist who was very popular in Russia.
You mean Kandinsky?
Uh-huh.
Yeah, it does.
Especially his earlier works.
Yes. Okay.
And part of the reason why I see so many complementary color pairs, like red and green, they complement each other. Yellow and violet. Blue and orange. Right? So he wants us to really like feel energized, I think, by this piece. Any thoughts?
What was it called again, Julie? Water what?
It's called Water of the Flowery Mill, 1948.
Okay.
Water in a flowery
Water of the Flowery Mill.
mill.
Yeah.
Ooh. How big is this painting?
I don't have the sizes on all of these, but I imagine if you look up Arshil Gorky, you're going to see that most of his work is very large, like 36 by 48 and bigger.
Ooh. Yeah.
What's his first name, Julie?
Arshil. I think I may have the spelling wrong. Somebody want to look that one up? Arshile. I may have gotten that wrong though.
Where is he from?
You're right.
Julie,
Yes.
did you say that this reminded you of Kandinsky?
Yes.
Yeah.
I don't know the background of all the artists, every single artist here. So what I would like to do mostly is focus on the work and what we're seeing, you know. Yeah.
But if it's Kandinsky, it would affect his influences.
Definitely.
Because he's a Russian.
Exactly. All right, let's go to the next one here.
Just playing with colors.
This one is by Barnett Newman, 1947, and this is called Genetic Moment.
That's
Genetic moment.
Wow.
It's funny, isn't it?
Phallic.
This is
Maybe
pretty
it's a
phallic.
conception. Maybe
Yeah.
the sperm moving in toward the egg.
Yeah. Love it. Yeah. Again, the simplification of forms to pictograms or pictographs, symbols, right? Not outlining everything as something that we would see in real life. And then let's go to the one woman who's in this group. And she was the wife of Jackson Pollock, Lee Krasner, a very accomplished artist in her own right, who after Jackson died ended up becoming very well known as well. But she was very much into, helping Jackson's career when he was alive.
Oh, God, yes.
So this is an interesting one. It's just called Composition, 1949. And it's a large work. I'm not sure of the exact size, but it's probably fairly large. As most of the paintings she did were on the larger scale.
So each one of those little boxes, she painted by hand?
I think so.
Or were they stamped from a?
They don't look stamped, but you know what might have been stamped first was the background. Like it looks like there's a background of such multiple colors and beautiful tones.
Yeah.
Very different.
Julie, she didn't have time to paint. Just keeping Jackson Pollock alive to paint was a full-time job.
It was. Jackson was very erratic. He would go into bars or into the places where people had their meetings. The artists were meeting each other, and everybody would just get stiff when he walked in because they didn't know if he was drunk or not. And he was kind of a scary character at times, and then he was also very sweet other times. So he was definitely not somebody you could trust to be even keeled. So she really, yeah, she dealt with a lot. Our last one for tonight is going to be a Franz Klein painting. And this is called Cross Section, 1956. Franz Klein loved the Asian arts, art out of Japan. He loved space, black and white. Any thoughts on this one?
Wow. Very Asian.
Yeah.
Love it. It's very intense.
Very luminous. The left box, the white, you can almost like look in it and see to a distance. It's got a three-dimensionality to it.
Yep.
I like that. Like to see so much depth in it, even though it's black and white, right, Echo?
Yeah.
Yeah. Also, the blacks have so many values in them. They're not just one solid black.
There's a lot of volume.
It looks like a broken windshield. And you're looking out of it.
Wow.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. Very exciting emotion in this too.
Yeah.
Just,
Beautiful.
Wow.
It's my group that I'm sharing with you. And what I'd like to share at the end here is a couple of quotes, also a couple more quotes from Jackson. One is, the modern artist is working with space and time and expressing his feelings rather than illustrating. Now, this particular one, this comment here, I would love your reaction to this one. This is a very different kind of quote. The painter locks himself out of his own studio and then has to break in like a thief. That is a Jackson Pollock quote. What do you think that means?
He has to lock himself out of his own studio and then has to break in. Is that what it said?
Like a thief.
Oh,
I just heard him knocking, actually.
You what? You what?
I just heard, I'm joking. I just heard Jackson Pollock knocking to get into his studio. I heard that noise.
It's because he wants to obliterate any preconception he has about what his creation is or is going to be. So he's seeking real freedom, and it's a tall challenge.
Very beautifully understood, Joe. It's very clear that he wants that clean slate when he goes in there. And if he's a thief and he's not supposed to be there, there's another aspect of that that I was thinking about. If he can't be in there real long, he's got to do whatever he's going to do quickly. He has to just do it with all the energy and feeling that he has in a moment's time.
mm-hmm.
But I get on that. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, my video keeps going on and off.
Okay.
What I get is we can't just walk into our studio. Well, this is me talk, from my feeling. I'm not able to just walk into my studio and just sit down and just start doing an abstract painting. You've got to force yourself into your studio and steal time away from the day and make it yours.
Beautiful. Beautifully said.
Thank you.
I want to show all of you something that's very dear to me. And the reason I'm sharing this little book is that I believe that the abstract expressionist movement and I have something in common. I'm going to put everybody on mute so that we don't have any other things happening here. There we go. What we have in common is that I was once a representational painter. I mean, I painted mostly works that you could identify as something from real life. And I had breast cancer when I was 52, so quite a few years ago, not too long, but definitely a while ago. And I decided that I was going to work out some of my healing process through making abstracted works. And this whole book has just some of them abstracted, some of them not, but I didn't judge myself. I painted each one of these based on the emotions that I had, and I put a title in the back of each one. And in the chat, I have put sustainingarts.com, which is the website of the business that is a gallery. On that particular site, there is a menu item called Sustaining Our World. And there's a part on there that's a little film about this book that I put together with a friend of mine, the producer, Elise Cheval. And basically it's called Disappear Fear, Find Joy. So if you want to go on there and check that out, you can see how I really got past my fears of expressing myself in an abstract way just to move through my feelings. And this painting in the back here is also an expression from moving into abstract art. And the other thing I'd like to let you know about, if you don't know already, is that I have a Facebook group called Abstract Art Behind the Scenes. And if you want to join that group, I'm going to be putting on there 3 other abstract expressionist paintings from that first generation of painters that I just talked about. And you can have further discussions on the Facebook group this week. So thank you, everybody. It's been really nice to be with all of you. I'm going to remove the spotlight and enjoy the week. I'll see you next time.
The art of dreams, dreams of art, a closer world, a world apart. The color